The Irish have another huge road game on Saturday as they head to Louisville to take on the Cardinals. And to get ready for it, I'll be joined by one of Louisville's best insiders to tell us everything we need to know about the matchup. Plus, we break down the meanest characters in the movie Rudy. That's all coming up next.
You are Locked On Irish, your daily podcast on the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What's up? Welcome to Locked On Irish, your daily Notre Dame podcast. Today is Thursday, October 5th, and thank you for making this your first listen of the day. I'm your host, Tyler Wojciak. I'm a Notre Dame alum and producer covering college football for Fox Sports. And today, I'm going to be joined by who I think is the premier voice covering UofL athletics, Mike Rutherford, the owner and manager of CardChronicle.com. And we talked a lot about the game. We went over both sides of the ball, what his expectations are for this matchup. And then at the end, we do a comprehensive breakdown of the supporting characters in Rudy, because Mike has been on this for a while, that Rudy, the path to Notre Dame was just one of the many difficulties he faced in his life. What he dealt with at home might have been much worse. So I had a ton of fun doing this. I hope you guys enjoyed as well. Tomorrow, be on the lookout for another mailbag episode. Get your questions in now. But all right, let's talk to Mike. All right, I'm really excited about this one. I'm here with Mike Rutherford, the manager and editor of CardChronicle.com, to preview the big game on Saturday. But before we dive into the matchup, set the stage for us, Mike. I know this is the first home sellout for Louisville since the last time Notre Dame came to town back in 2019, but this feels way bigger than that. So when was the last time Louisville hosted a home game of this magnitude?
I think, and it's funny, I got this question earlier today, actually. I think it's the 2017 Clemson game when College Game Day was in town. It was, if you remember the 2016 Clemson game, Louisville goes down there. I think
the
Louisville
James Quick game.
Exactly, the James Quick game. More people refer to it as the Deshaun Watson, Lamar Jackson game, but Louisville fans definitely refer to it as the James Quick game. Louisville's actually favored in that game, which is crazy considering how far they fell just 2 years later. But Louisville goes down there. It's the electric game. Clemson squeaks out a win. Lamar Jackson comes back in 2017. It's the rematch. They're coming in here, defending national champs, all that good stuff, and that was a huge game. It ended up being a huge letdown for Louisville. It also was the last time that Louisville played in this spot, the 7:30 ABC game. So I think that's probably the answer. But you're right. This feels like a much bigger deal than the 2019 game. And unless something crazy happens, this is going to be the most attended game in the history of UofL football. They expanded that stadium in 2018. They've only sold it out twice, like you said, since that happened. And I'll be shocked if the number for this game isn't bigger than that game in 2019, which was the season opener for both teams.
Yeah, that game was fun. I was at that, and there was definitely a new sense of energy. Sattersfield's first game, and frankly, I was pretty surprised how his tenure turned out. Considering that game, I was like, all right, I thought Notre Dame would beat them pretty handedly. They didn't. I was like, all right, well, Louisville's definitely on the up. It didn't happen that way. But now the Brom homecoming has finally happened. A lot of people, myself included, thought it was going to happen back in 2019, but it didn't. It's here now, and so far, it's been about as good of a start as you could probably hope for. Louisville's 5-0 for the first time since 2013, and it seems like the energy around the program right now couldn't be any higher going into this game. So what do you expect the atmosphere will be like in the stadium on Saturday?
Well, I think it's going to be fantastic. It's a Louisville fan base. I think every fan base does this to an extent, outside of the Notre Dames, the Ohio States, the Alabamas, where there's a lot of complaining about the week-to-week attendance and fans getting into the stadium on time or fans leaving too early if it's a blowout. Louisville, for games like this, Louisville fans show up and they're energetic and they're electric. Like, this is very much an event town. We do the Derby big. We do music festivals big. When Muhammad Ali, when he passed, we celebrated his life. That was a huge, huge thing. Louisvillians show up for stuff like this. And I think you're going to see a crowd that is engaged the entire time. I think you're going to see a crowd that's hungry for a victory. The Scott Satterfield area, you sort of alluded to it, was just at best like slightly above average. And Louisville fans have been desperate to get back to that national stage basically since Lamar Jackson left. And this feels like that moment. I think that regardless of what happens on Saturday, the fans are excited about the direction of the program under the prodigal son, Jeff Brom, but they really want to get back to feeling like this can be a perennial top 20 program, especially with the playoff expansion coming up next year. This can, I think that the dream is, UofL is never going to be top 5 every year, competing for national titles every year. It's never who they've been. But if you can be a program that every, I don't know, 4 years or so is flirting with being a top 12 team, flirting with going to that college football playoff, flirting with being one of the best teams in the ACC, depending on how the conference looks in a few years. I think that's an achievable goal for Cardinal football. And Louisville fans that have lived through being a top 10 team in 04, a top 10 team in 06, a team that was just outside the playoff for most of the season in 2016, have gotten that taste of the good life in football. And it's hard to go back to being just a whatever program after you've had that taste. I think Jeff Brom is the guy that most fans believe can get us back to that point. And beating Notre Dame and starting 6-0 on Saturday, it would be a hell of a start for sure.
It all seems attainable right now with Brom at the helm. I think Louisville's got the resources. They've got everything they need to compete at the top of the ACC every year. And when my family moved to Louisville, it was back in 2006. So at that time, Louisville football was basically at its peak. And one of the games I can remember from that season was the blackout game against West Virginia. And that was an insane atmosphere. Do you think it's going to be anything close to that on Saturday?
I think it will be. Like, honestly, I got asked the question earlier this week about, compare this game to the all-time Louisville home games, outside of Kentucky games, which I think Kentucky games are a different animal, but it's rivalry. And look, Louisville's never played a game against Kentucky where both teams have been ranked, but I think this will rank right up there with that West Virginia game. Louisville also played Miami earlier that year. They hosted them when Miami was still kind of like in that, the U era from the early 2000s. They were hanging on to it a little bit. So they came in with some cachet as a top 12 team. Florida State came here back in 2016, which was the first time that Louisville had College Game Day. And then Florida State also came in here at number 4 in the country back in 2002, which is a game that really put Louisville on the map. I think the atmosphere for this game, the environment for this game should be, unless Louisville falls behind big early, right on par with those games. The common denominator in most of those games is that Louisville has won them. Like they've done a really good job historically in this spot where they've had more eyes on them than usual, and where that kind of peripheral fan, the fan that considers themselves a Louisville fan but maybe doesn't live and die with the game every week, you get them in the stadium, you get them going nuts, you get them talking about this game. I think that's when Cardinal Stadium can really be a tough place to play. And I think Louisville fans watched the Notre Dame Duke game last week, and they heard Marcus Freeman and some of the players talk about, the atmosphere definitely played a factor in this being such a close game. And I think we look at that and we're like, we went down to Durham, we beat Duke by 60 a few years ago. I think if that atmosphere gave you something, we're expecting to be a little bit better than that on Saturday. So I do expect it to be wild. I expect it to be a hell of a time. Again, assuming that Louisville can keep it close for 4 quarters, the fans should stay engaged the entire time.
Yeah, I just looked it up. That West Virginia-Louisville game back in 2006, West Virginia was number 3, Louisville was number 5. It was a huge game at the time and had a bunch of implications for that season. But quick aside from the game, when did it become L&N Federal Credit Union Stadium? Because I know why it's not Papa John's Cardinal Stadium anymore, but I haven't lived in Louisville in a few years, and that name caught me by surprise.
This is the first year. This is the first year that it's L&N Stadium. There was some talk about calling it the Fed, which would be interesting considering Louisville's recent history with the FBI and its athletic program. So I like the Fed, but L&N Stadium is what they're going with. They've shortened it. It's not Cardinal Stadium anymore. It's just L&N Stadium. And I'm actually kind of proud at how quickly the fans have adapted to this, because stupid stuff like this tends to cause a rift in any fan base, like where I'm calling it this or I'm calling it that. And the fans seem to be like, they're like, okay, we're cool with L&N Stadium.
Oh my God, I can't even imagine the message boards at the time of the time the name was announced. There's probably a lot. But what has the Jack Plummer experience been like so far? Because I've watched a lot of Louisville games this season, and I'm not going to lie, I've seen him make some really impressive throws. And I was like, wow, is that the same Jack Plummer who started against Notre Dame twice already? But then he's made some plays, like the interception last week against NC State in the red zone, where it made me question if he's ever played football before. So it seems like it's been a roller coaster ride. How would you describe it?
You pretty much summed it up right there. That's exactly what Louisville fans have kind of gotten out of this. And I do keep forgetting that he's had to play Notre Dame for the 3rd straight year with a third different team, which is kind of crazy. Definitely reflective of this modern era of college football. But he's a guy. I think the key with Jack Plummer has been his QBR, which, you could say QB quarterback rating for what it's worth, is over 134 when he has a clean pocket. it's like 33 something when he's been pressured. He has been really bad when opposing defenses have brought the heat and they've gotten home. And that's where he's run into some trouble. The decision-making has been iffy at times. And I think that's why the Louisville fan base has been so, maybe critical is too strong of a word, but they've definitely been a little bit leery of Jack Plummer's play because his mistakes are so glaring. When he's good, he's really good. He's got a ton of playmakers around him. I think Louisville fans look at this and they say, just keep it simple. He's a guy, Jeff Brom basically brought him here because he knew his system. And with Brom, it's a lot like when Bobby Petrino was here a couple of times. You would hear players say, the quarterback doesn't have to be that good. It helps when he is, but as long as he understands the system, knows where the open man is going to be, and gets the ball out quickly and accurately to where it's supposed to be, he's going to put up numbers. And I think the Jeff Brom system is very similar. And if Plummer can, look, he's got Jamari Thrash out there, who's a big-time playmaker. He's got Jawar Jordan in the backfield. Kevin Coleman was a Deion Sanders guy at Jackson State, who was the freshman of the year in that conference. Like, if he can just find those guys and get them the ball quickly and accurately, he's going to put up big-time numbers. But he's struggled with that at times this season. It seems like his decision-making has been a second or two slow. And he doesn't have the biggest arm in the world, which basically means – if you've got Jamari Thrash streaking down the sidelines, you've got a limited window to get him the ball. And if you can't, like, he's underthrown deep passes a number of times. It's led to a couple of his interceptions. And then just like you said, the decision-making, the reluctance to just throw the ball away or to just take a sack at certain times has come back to really bite him. I think he's got 3 intentional grounding penalties so far this season, all on plays where he's like scrambling out of the pocket and going down and kind of tries to do like a Brett Favre shovel out of bounds, and nobody's buying it. Those have been bad. And then the interception, he threw 2 really bad picks last week. One right at the end of the first half, he just either missed a route or dramatically underthrew Jaden Thompson along the left sideline. That allowed NC State to kick a field goal right before the end of the half. That's a terrible mistake, especially in a very low-scoring game. And the one that he threw in the end zone, I think this is not hyperbole. It's the worst decision I've ever seen a Louisville quarterback make in my life as a fan. I had like 3 different people send me videos, like their wives or the significant others were taking videos of them, hoping, because we thought we were going to score and take full control of the game. So their wives are filming them for a celebration reaction, and they have the opposite reaction. And it made me wish that like I had everybody's reaction, because it's funny now that we won the game, but at the time. Yeah. I was saying some things like I was having some issues with the decision to throw it up in the end to nobody in particular besides the NC State safety. So as long as he avoids those types of mistakes, he's been pretty good. He's good enough to beat just about anybody on Louisville's schedule, especially with the weapons that he has. But it's just limiting the glaring mistakes has been an issue for him for sure.
I was actually on the way to dinner during that, and I was listening to the game on the radio, so I wasn't seeing it happen. And the way that the announcers reacted to it, it was like an affront to the game of football. They were so disgusted by that decision. And then I was like, oh my God, what happened? So then I was like anxiously waiting to watch it on my phone, and it lived up to the hype. It was shocking. It reminded me of some decisions that Drew Pine made last year, but I don't want to get into all that. I don't think it's a stretch to say that this is the best supporting cast that Plummer has ever had. Jawar Jordan is so explosive a running back. Jamari Thrash, you've already mentioned him. He's a game breaker at wide receiver. But that being said, NC State's defense was able to bottle up both of them in last week's game, even though UofL was able to pull off the win. I watched most of that game. I have my own ideas of why NC State had success, and also they're just a good defense, so I don't want to say, like, NC State has some really good players. Notre Dame dealt with them earlier this year. But why do you think Louisville struggled so much offensively in that game, and what do you expect they'll change when they face Notre Dame?
The biggest thing, and it legitimately surprised me, because NC State they're a capable defense, but they don't have the type of Bradley Chubb playmakers that they've had in years past, the can't-miss NFL guys. I think what's his name? Peyton Wilson.
Peyton Wilson is a stud, yeah.
Is good. He's really good for sure, but they're not loaded in that front seven like they have been in some years past. So the fact that they were able to really stifle Louisville's running game, it surprised me. Like I thought Louisville was going to be able to run the ball somewhat effectively against them. And instead, Jawar Jordan, who entered the game as the nation's leader in yards per carry, only has 32 yards on 16 carries, could not really get loose at all. The other guys they brought in, Maurice Turner, had no success. They got to Plummer consistently in the backfield. And to me, that's the biggest thing. I think, one, they were able to limit Jamari Thrash's effectiveness because they have Aiden White, who's a really, really good cornerback, and they mostly focused on him. Two, the blitzing, Plummer never really adjusted to it. He didn't do a good job at recognizing where it was coming from. And NC State, with Tony Gibson, the defensive coordinator, they do a good job at disguising their blitzes. But still, there were some really obvious pass rush downs where Plummer just seemed totally perplexed by the fact that he was getting pressure from his blind side. Like, he not reading, not finding the hot route, not checking down, not changing anything. That really, I think, stifled the Louisville offense. And then also they just missed on some big opportunities. There was a play on the very first drive where Brom got exactly what he wanted, which was Jawar Jordan matched up against a linebacker in coverage. Jordan streaking wide open down the left sideline, and Plummer just overthrows him by like 8 yards. And they never really got going after that. So I think the rush defense, whatever NC State was doing, dominating at the point of attack, was, they didn't have to honor the pass game that much because they just, they knew that the rush wasn't doing anything. And then Plummer just a lot of times just didn't get rid of the ball the way that he should. I think the fact that Thrash was so bottled up last week, it makes me a little bit nervous going into this game, just because he's going to be going up against, in all likelihood, an even better cornerback this week. I know that the Notre Dame defense, I think they have, their safeties are okay. Their linebackers are good, but not great. But the defensive line and then the cornerbacks are what really, really scares me, because I think that they can shut down Thrash in the same way that he was shut down last week. And then Louisville didn't really have a good option when Jamari wasn't being able to make plays. So, that's the best way that I can describe what happened last week.
We'll be right back with Mike to talk more about the upcoming game against Louisville. But first, a word from eBay Motors. Passion, drive, and patience. What brings home the winning trophy is also what keeps your ride or die alive. eBay Motors has everything you need to maintain your vehicle and level it up to peak performance. From superchargers, roof racks, exhaust kits, LED headlights, and more, whether you're into speed, power, or style, eBay Motors has got you covered. With over 122 million parts for your number one ride or die, you'll always find exactly what you're looking for. And with eBay Guaranteed Fit, your part is guaranteed to fit your ride every time or your money back. Because with eBay Motors, you're burning rubber, not cash. With all the parts you need at the prices you want, it's easy to turn your car into the MVP and bring home that win. Keep your ride or die alive at ebay.com/motors. eBay Guaranteed Fit, only available to U.S. customers. Eligible items only. Exclusions apply. We've talked a little bit about Plummer's struggles against the blitz. How much do you attribute that to the offensive line and not giving him protection, or is it just Plummer sort of kind of freezing up when he's back there and he sees the blitz coming?
I think it's mostly the latter. The offensive line has been pretty good for the most part of the season. Like, they gave him a clean pocket throughout the Boston College game, and he put up outrageous numbers against BC. The issue against NC State was willing to bring like 3 guys. Like they were bringing 7 sometimes, and at that point it becomes a numbers game, and you're going to have a free rusher, and it's on the quarterback to throw the ball where the blitz is coming from. And Plummer just did not do it effectively. And I think the fact that they felt really good about their 2 cornerbacks, NC State did, putting them on an island and bringing that pressure, it maybe limited Plummer's confidence in just throwing that quick route to Kevin Coleman or throwing that quick route to Jamari Thrash. But I do think the offensive line for the most part has been really solid. Willie Tyler, the left tackle, has been very good. Rutgers transfer that was pretty highly sought after in the portal. Brian Hudson, the center, is an all-conference player. He's the only member of Louisville's offense or defense that was preseason All-ACC. If there is a little bit of a weakness, I think it's probably depth. They don't have, if a guy gets dinged up or a guy just needs a break, they don't have a great second string on the offensive line. And also the right guard, Ronaldo Brown, has been a little penalty prone at times this year. But I think the offensive line for the most part has been good. So I think the struggles with the blitz are more about Plummer and the receivers, who did have a handful of drops that should be said last week against NC State, than it is about the O-line.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I want to flip it over to the other side of the ball, because Notre Dame fans are familiar with Jack Plummer. Louisville fans are awfully familiar with Sam Hartman. And the last time they watched Hartman play in Cardinal Stadium, there's really no other way to put it. Hartman had a complete and utter meltdown. He was responsible for 6 turnovers in a single quarter. And Wake Forest came into that game ranked number 10 in the country, which is exactly what Notre Dame is now. So there are some parallels there, but the circumstances are a lot different now for both sides, Louisville's defense and with Hartman being at Notre Dame. So what are your expectations for Hartman and his return to Louisville?
I mean, I can tell you what my hopes are. My hopes are that he walks in that building and feels the ghosts of Cardinal Stadium past, now LNN Stadium. And, I hope that he makes a mistake early and then he just kind of starts, having all this little PTSD, and flashbacks to last year. He was terrible last year in that game. A lot of that was because Louisville had a much different defensive philosophy under their old defensive coordinator, Brian Brown. Like, they led the FBS in sacks last year because it was a feast or famine defense. They're going to bring all that pressure all the time. And if it costs us a couple of big plays, then so be it. We feel like we're going to make up for that with turnovers that our pressure causes or by big sacks. And Wake Forest never adjusted to that. And like you said, Hartman had the 6 turnovers himself, 3 interceptions, 3 fumbles in that third quarter. They had 2 more turnovers from other people in that quarter. They turned the ball over 8 times in one quarter as Louisville routed them by 27. And it was a top 10 Wake Forest team coming into the building. But, you look at the numbers this year, and Hartman, by the way, only came into that game with 1 interception and I think 2 total turnovers. So it wasn't like he'd just been throwing the ball around. But you look at his stats this year, 14 touchdowns, no interceptions. It's very similar, but I do think it's very different. He's not going to be facing the constant pressure from the Louisville defense that he saw last year, and he's got a ton more weapons to throw to. I know you guys, 2 of those weapons are back this week at wide receiver, which I think will help out a lot. And he has a much, much, much better traditional running attack with Wojciak Estime, who's going to be the best running back that Louisville's faced this year. So you can't just key on the pass. You can't just key on Sam Hartman and try to make him a sitting duck back there. It's not going to work. But yeah, there's definitely a part of Louisville fans that are thinking like, kind of a similar situation went pretty well for us last year. Maybe we can have something similar happen this go round. And that was his second start against Louisville. The first start didn't go much better for him. He's been 0-2 against the Cards with, I think, 8 total turnovers to his name. So he's never played well against Louisville. But like you said, it's a much, much better supporting cast for him this year. I
just looked it up. In that game against Louisville, Wake Forest was leading 14-3 at halftime. After the third quarter, they were down 14-48.
It's the craziest quarter in the history of Louisville football. Unbelievable.
I remember the live check-ins they were doing during that game because I'm pretty sure Notre Dame was on. I was watching that game, and they're like, and we got an update from Louisville, another interception or another turnover. And I was like, this can't be real. That has to be 5 or 6. Ended up being 6 in the quarter. So it was a truly insane quarter. Really, I'm sure Sam Hartman has not forgotten about it in the time since. And I think from Notre Dame fans, we're hoping that he gets a chance to exercise those demons because he kind of did something like that earlier this season when he went to NC State. I think he was 0-2 in his career there and was able to get a win. So maybe this is the Sam Hartman revenge tour. But sort of on that note, Louisville's defensive line has been so impressive to me this season. Ashton Gelati, he's one of the best pass rushers Notre Dame is going to face all season, but they've got a bunch of good players on that unit. Stephen Herron is another name. Their stats won't blow you away, but they can be really disruptive. So how do you think they'll fare against Notre Dame's offensive line?
I think that's the big question because, it's a defense that's held up better than maybe Louisville fans thought they were going to, especially up front so far this season. But they haven't faced an offense like Notre Dame's. I mean, and that's the big question about Louisville on the whole. Is they're 5-0, but you look at that schedule, a lot of the teams that they've played have looked much worse even in the weeks, after their game against the Cards than they looked at the time. Indiana's been really bad since they played Louisville in a close game. Georgia Tech hasn't been good. NC State, who's probably the best team Louisville's played, that they squeaked out a win over in Raleigh. They lost to the team that's coming to town this week by 3 touchdowns a few weeks ago. So I think Ashton Gelati is the name to know for Notre Dame fans up front for sure. He was a big time recruit 3 years ago. He got on the field last year, really showed strides. I think established himself as a likely breakout guy this year at the end of last season. And he leads the nation right now in quarterback pressures. So he's he's beating left tackles pretty consistently. He's not getting home a lot, but he's definitely forcing quarterbacks out of the pocket and forcing them to make some plays on the run. You mentioned Stephen Herron, the transfer from Stanford, who is a Louisville boy. He's from Trinity High School here in town. He's been really good. I think he's also the biggest thing with Stephen Herron is he stepped into a leadership role that was vacant. Louisville's best players last season were its linebackers. pretty much all of them left. Yasir Abdullah got drafted. Yaya Diaby got drafted. Monty Montgomery transferred to Ole Miss. They lost a ton of production in the middle, and they had to go out and get some guys in the transfer portal. Harron was the big one, and he's really stepped up and been great. Destel, who played nose tackle in the old system, he's kind of a guy that's going to cause a lot of chaos down there in the trenches. He's a big body who's more athletic than you'd expect to see from somebody that size. And then I think the most pleasant surprise for the entire defense and maybe the entire team has been a handful of linebackers that have been in the program for a while, but haven't really produced a ton, that have been really good so far. TJ Quinn was mostly a special teams guy before this year. He was the MVP of the spring game on the defensive side of the ball. He's become the team's leading tackler. And then Jalen Alderman, who was only known to Louisville fans because he got in one play at the end of the UCF game 2 years ago and returned an interception like right before the end of before the final horn for a touchdown that won the game for Louisville. That was pretty much the only play he'd made in 2 years at Louisville. He steps into a starting role. He's been all over the field. He's been really good as a redshirt sophomore this season. So the linebackers, better than we thought they were going to be. The defensive line has been really good, but like we said, it's a different beast this week against Sam Hartman, Audric Estime, and that contingent of Notre Dame front offense.
Last question on the game, and then we got to get to the stuff that I really brought you on for. But Louisville secondary has been prone to giving up yards this season, but the defense as a whole has been able to really clamp down on opposing offenses in the red zone. The Cardinals have the 5th best red zone scoring defense in the entire country. So from the outside, it seems like a perfect example of a bend but don't break defense. But Louisville is also 122nd in the country in explosive plays again. So it does break sometimes. How would you describe your confidence level in the unit as a whole going up against an Irish offense that admittedly has struggled in their last 2 games?
I would say cautiously optimistic because, like you said, Louisville's one of the best explosive play teams in the country on offense, and they're one of the worst explosive play defenses in the country. They give up a lot of what they get on the other side of the ball, and more times than not, it's been, I think, because they've brought pressure and that hasn't gotten home, and they've played that zone defense and opposing, tight ends, which makes me nervous because Notre Dame's leading receiver is a tight end, have found the soft spot in that zone more times than not. There have also been a number of plays, if you've watched Louisville against Indiana or against Georgia Tech or against NC State even last week, where they've had open guys and they've gone against bad quarterbacks that have just misfired. So that definitely makes me nervous against a really accurate 6-year quarterback in Sam Hartman. I think what makes me more nervous about this game, though, is Louisville's done a good job on obvious rundowns, first down, 1st and 10, 2nd and 4. They've done a good job at kind of dominating the point of attack and not putting the opposing offenses in a second and manageable and where they can get really creative with their play calling. I'm nervous about a guy like Estime getting 5, 6, 7 yards on first downs. Like that would be my biggest concern in this game. And then putting Hartman in a place where he can get a little creative and create some of those chunk plays because they feel confident in their ability to run it on 3rd down and pick up another first down. So they've been good for most of the year. They've definitely been a bend but don't break defense, but that's going to help you beat NC State. It's going to help you beat Georgia Tech. It may not help you beat Notre Dame. So it's definitely a concern of mine going into this weekend.
All right, let's have some fun. Yesterday, I read your article where you call out Rudy's dad for being maybe one of the meanest characters ever created in the history of cinema, and I could not recommend it enough to everyone listening because it is laugh out loud funny. But Mike, please take this opportunity to explain why Rudy's dad is so insufferable.
He's such an ass. I mean, he's like, I loved Rudy growing up. And I say this in the story. Like, I've probably watched Rudy 40 times over my life. I had a high school teacher who played it every single year when I was going to high school.
Wait,
so
what high school did you go to?
I went to Trinity. So it was, they have Rudy like playing on every room in the school when you walk through. It's it's a rite of passage to watch Rudy in religion class, like at Trinity. That's what they do. It's like half of the course. But like watching it as an adult, I fired it up for the first time a couple of years ago. I was shocked at just how vicious, not just the dad, but basically Rudy's entire family, and how little goes into like why they're that mean to him. Like, Rudy's dad from the very beginning, first of all, in the very first scene of the movie where Rudy comes home and he's like, I'm going to play football for Notre Dame. His dad laughs in his face, acts like he's going to fake hit him is his response to it. And then encourages the whole family to make fun of him. It's the opposite of every the like parenting tip you would think of, and like people are like, well, he's a product of a different era. I'm like, this man saw America succeed in World War II. He saw America, thrive and become the world superpower. And his message to his son after all of that is that dreams are terrible. Don't ever think about pursuing them. Do as little as possible. He's the absolute worst. And then the moment that really got me in the entire movie that I'd forgotten about is, his dad, he tries to talk him out of going to Notre Dame, tries to talk him out of doing everything because he's like, you're dumb. You suck at sports. Live your life in this death trap that killed your best friend, the only redeemable character in this movie besides Rudy. That's what you need to do. He goes up there. He goes to Holy Cross. He gets good grades. He goes through hell. He gets into Notre Dame. And so he comes back. He shoves it in his dad's face, which is what I would have done at the plant. And his dad is like, my son's going to Notre Dame. He's happy for like 10 seconds. And then Rudy is like, his dad's like, why don't you come work at the mill that killed your best friend for a couple of weeks while you're home for break? And Rudy's like, no, I got to get back. Football trats are coming. And his dad hangs his head in shame. Like, he just attained something that you thought was impossible. Probably the greatest feat of anybody in the history of the Rudiger family. And then when he's like, I'm going to go try it for the football team, you're like, I can't believe I ever enjoyed this kid. Frank, the ass, the ass, he's my new favorite son again. Like, he never gives him any credit the entire movie until he actually sees him play against Georgia Tech at the very end. And even then, it's like all about him. He's like, this is the most beautiful sight my eyes have ever seen. He doesn't give his son any credit. He's terrible.
I never understood why Frank was the favorite. They do nothing to explain that at all. Maybe it's just because he works at the mill, but I think my favorite part of that whole story, when you brought up the high school priest/teacher who basically told Rudy that he's too stupid and poor to even ride the bus to go to Notre Dame.
Don't even look at the campus. You're not even allowed to think about it. Like, don't dream about it.
Yeah.
You're a moron. You have to stay here and live in Joliet, Illinois for the rest of your life. You're not even allowed to tour and think about going to the school. What a godly message to send to a young man trying to make the best of himself.
Rudy's probably like, dude, the path to get there is hard enough when every single person in my life is doing everything they can to knock me down. It's making it more impossible. But with all this in mind, could you please power rank the 5 meanest characters in Rudy? Like, I already know who's your number 1, but give me the other 4.
I actually think Frank is number 1 because Frank is never like the dad. At least you can, he's a dick, but like you can write off some of the stuff of like a gruff exterior, trying to be a hard-nosed father. It's a product of his time. You can do that to an extent. He's terrible, but Frank, they never give any sort of backstory whatsoever as to why he hates Rudy so much. It's like, because, I don't know, he played harder than him in high school football, so he hates him. So, like, there's never any reason. He's an absolute atrocious older brother to him the entire movie. His best friend dies in a fire, and he's like, good, he deserved it. Frank is absolutely the worst character in the movie. The dad is second. I mean, Frank Frank is like acting like he's happy for Rudy when he makes a sack. The look on his face still makes you think,
why did he get the invite? Yeah,
he had no business going to South Bend.
Yeah,
take the other brother who at least apologized for boinking your old girlfriend. So Frank's the worst. The dad is second for sure. I think the priest is third. It's a limited role, but it is a death blow where he won't even let him get on the bus, and he's he's like he has the whole spiel too about like the problem with dreamers is they're never achievers, which again is not exactly the message we need to be sending to America's youth in the early 1960s or whenever this is supposed to be. So he's third. I'm going to put this kind of an underrated pick, but probably deserves more. The girlfriend.
Yeah, I thank you. That's who I was thinking. It's got to be the girlfriend.
I mean, she's so mad at Rudy because he doesn't want to get married at 19. Like calm down. Like let him work in the mill for a few more years. Let him do something. And the second he leaves, he hasn't even been gone for 4 months. She starts shacking up with his brother when he's home, and she acts like she's so apologetic. Like, I'm so proud of you. Like, whatever. Like you're sleeping with my older brother.
And she acted surprised when Rudy came home for Christmas. It's like, what did you think he was going to do? Did you really think you were going to be able to keep this a secret for that long?
I mean, Rudy comes home for Christmas, shows his dad that he's got an A and 3 Bs from Holy Cross. His dad won't even get out of his recliner and is just like, good for you, whatever. Frank looks at him with this just disdain. His old girlfriend, he finds out, is sleeping with his brother. So he leaves in the middle of the Christmas break to go back to Joliet, to South Bend, Illinois by himself. Nobody stops him. Literally nobody is like, no, you spend the holidays with your family. Everybody's like, thank God he's gone. Who cares? Like, no, don't. It's terrible. They're all awful. Fifth, I would put, I mean, probably the brother who's sleeping with the girlfriend. Like he's terrible. I can't think of anybody else who's that bad to, like, they're all family members. Like besides the priest, they're all like the people who are supposed to be supporting Rudy the most in his life are the worst to him. Making the team at Notre Dame is no obstacle. It's the easiest thing Rudy's ever done in his life after growing up with these a-holes for his entire life.
I know. It's almost like there's some people watching that movie who are like, damn, if I want my son to play football at Notre Dame, the only thing I have to do is just be incredibly mean, show him no love, no compassion, no empathy for his entire life, and then maybe he'll have the motivation to walk on the Notre Dame football team. But it sounds like you've been hearing from some members of the Rudiger family ever since they came out. The real Rudiger family.
Yeah. Which I don't think they read the post because like, how dare you talk about my grandfather that way? I'm like, I'm making a point in the story to say the only information I can find about Rudy's actual dad is that he was a very loving father, not at all the way he was portrayed in the movie. I think somebody told me that he was so like his actual obituary made it a point to say like, I'm not Ned Beatty's character in the movie. Like he was a great father. He was not that bad. Trust me. So like, but like, yeah, some of the grandchildren, I think, found the story were like, how dare you? I'm like, well, watch the movie. I think it's a pretty defensive position. It's obvious. The other thing about the movie that shocked me that I never processed as a kid that is so ridiculous is, so he goes out on his own. He goes to Holy Cross. He has success. He gets into Notre Dame, for God's sake. He makes the team. He's practicing. Like the dad still doesn't believe him because he's like, I watch the games every week and I don't see you running out there. It's like, at what point do you have a little bit of faith in your son that he's not just telling the grandest lie of all time? Like, believe in your son the tiniest bit. It's horrible. It's terrible parenting.
Yeah, no follow-up questions. Like, I just watched the games. You're not out there. So I actually looked it up. I found his obituary, and in it says, quote, he worked 2 full-time jobs and sometimes a third part-time one to raise his children, one of whom grew up to be the title character in Rudy, the feel-good sports movie about an undersized underdog kid's quest to play football for Notre Dame. Mr. Rudiger died last month at his retirement home in Wisconsin. At one point in the film, Mr. Rudiger, portrayed by Ned Beatty, tells his son, Daniel Rudy Rudiger, chasing your stupid dream causes nothing but you and everyone around you heartache. But in reality, quote, Dad was our biggest fan, said his one son, Tim. Daniel Rudiger agrees. The filmmakers took some liberties, he said, using that scene with Mr. Beatty to symbolize every pessimistic message Rudy had ever received about downsizing his goals. So you're right. They had to literally go out of their way in the obituary to sort of defend his honor. And it sounds like the Rudiger family just is completely missing the point with your article.
He's such an ass in the movie that when he died, the whole family was like, we gotta get this out there. We don't want anybody to tie him to Ned Beatty's character. I do love the irony too. Ned Beatty from Louisville, Louisville's own Eastern High School. A lot of people pointed that out as well when I wrote that. So a lot of different tie-ins here between Louisville and Notre Dame. I think we can all agree, though, the Ned Beatty character in the movie, absolute dick.
All right, that's a perfect note to end it on, Mike. This has been a ton of fun. I really appreciate you taking the time to do this. Enjoy the game on Saturday. I hope you have a great time, but hate the outcome, and best of luck to you the rest of the season.
You too, man. I appreciate it.
That's a wrap for this episode. Thanks again for making Locked On Irish your first listen of the day. For the everyday listeners, we'll be doing another mailbag episode tomorrow, so be sure to get your questions in. Plus, I'm going to have another Louisville insider on the show as well. Before you head out, please subscribe on YouTube or wherever you're listening to the podcast and follow the show on social media. The Twitter account is @LockedOnIrish. Instagram is @LockedOnIrishPod, and my personal Twitter account is @Tyler, WOJCIAK. I'll see you guys tomorrow.